Howdy folks, Rudrose here, and today we are so tired of wasting time on all these control matches that have been dominating the metagame. We need to get lore, get in, get out, and move on with our day. So today I am presenting to you an Amethyst Steel Lore Burn Aggro deck. And I have to give a big shout out to my friend Jimmy. This was absolutely his deck idea. So Jimmy, thank you for the deck idea. I am happy to showcase it here. And this deck is very straightforward and very simple. You just want to get lore and get out. So we are maximizing all of the cards that can give us instant lore in the game, which is Honey Marin, which is a new card. The only requirement is they have to have an exerted character. That's pretty easy to fulfill. Maybe only once in testing have I been like, oh, I drew Honey Marin and they didn't currently have an exerted character, but they probably will. We also have cards like the new Giant Cobra. One of the downsides of this card in a fair deck was that sometimes you would actually just run out of cards to submit to his effect, but with something like the Amethyst Chromicon, keeping our hand full, we usually have plenty of cards to put the Cobra down, instantly gain 2 lore. White Rose, instantly gain lore. Everyone knows Goat, gain lore, gain it on the way out. Knowledge and Wisdom, instant 2 lore. This Is My Family is another new card. It's essentially like a less Knowledge and Wisdom, but it draws you a card, and it's a song, so you can have characters sing it. Gain a lore, draw a card. Bosses on a roll, gain a lore, and you get to set up the deck. In the past, the one downside of this card is it didn't draw itself, but it works really well with This Is My Family, as if you can set up a This Is My Family on top of your deck, put it into your hand with the Chromicon, and then immediately use This Is My Family, which means you can get to the next cards you set up for the bosses on a roll. So, as you can see, I'm pretty sure there's more than enough lore here to win the game without ever questing, but of course we're going to be aggressively questing as well. And so, again, this isn't very complicated, but that's kind of what I like about it. Just get in, go fast, get out. All of our 1-drops help us draw deeper into our deck. I think Diablo is especially important right now with all the steel running around. Smee is just a good body that's probably going to trade with something if they challenge it, and then is also going to get you 2 lore. And Doc is just another way to keep burning through our deck and go, go, go. Really, the only downside I had with this deck in testing is that it doesn't really have any way to combat your opponent. It's kind of like a solitaire deck where it just wants to play its own game. Other than Fox and kind of Snake, but those cards just challenge. Like if you notice, there's no offensive actions in here. There's none of the steel removal songs you might be used to. So this one is definitely designed to go quick. And if you fall behind, yes, it's going to struggle. But I think it could have a pretty... This might be a solid choice in the meta, just because it goes so quickly and you're okay just pumping the gas with the Amethyst Chromicon, because in theory, you should be able to get there way before your opponent with all this instant lore gain. Pete is, of course, there to help protect your board from a Be Prepared coming up on turn 7. The only 2 cards I'm not over the moon about is Snake and Fox. Fox is, of course, very good because it has Rush. Snake, like in theory, you can use it to bounce back the Cobra to then play it again, discard again, gain 2, bounce the Goat. But in practice, I often found that for the most part, I would rather just be putting on pressure, and Snake does like slow down your board presence a little. However, it can be good. Let's say you put down a Chernobog's followers on turn 1. They open, you're playing, blue-gray, they open with a Bell or a Cinderella, and they're getting ready to hit you with a Storm Rage on. It can be worth it then to bounce with the Snake to help protect that card. As far as a few alternatives, I looked through all the other cards that gain instant lore. None of the others seem very good. Like Elsa, you would have to play an Anna. The Kanai is just kind of slow. Like in theory, if you could get him banished. But again, you don't really want to be challenging. You want to be going quickly. The Queen, again, is kind of slow. She has to sit there for a whole turn. And if you're going that early, they might not even have enough cards for them to exert. Restoring the Crown is fun, but you're not really trying to get to 6 lore and then challenge a bunch of stuff. Hades, same thing. It's a bit too expensive. This Mim, it's just, I think it's, even with the Chromicons, I think it's too expensive because it's 3 to play it outright. Then you have to pay an additional 2 and continually discard a card. But I think we just have more efficient ways of getting the lore. So yeah, nothing else really stood out to me as ways of gaining instant lore. Again, Arthur's just kind of slow and outdated at this point. I had a consideration for Spellbook, but if you play this on turn 3, that's your whole turn 3. But it could be worth it if it's adding more uninkables. I think something you could absolutely add into this is Calhoun. Not only is she pretty resilient to all the steel stuff going around, she gives you some way to challenge if they have something on their board you need to challenge. It will raise your uninkable count, but we're pretty low on 12. So I think of all the cards that come to mind, Calhoun is probably the one that you could potentially add in here, maybe cut down on a couple snakes. So let's show you some games and just show you how quickly we can go. With all the support Control has been getting, I'm not really sure what the premier aggro deck is. It could still be the Diggy Diggy Hole variant, which is Amber Steel. What you're seeing on screen right now is actually traditional Steel Song. But I've also heard the new green Amber one is good, but I don't know. That one, I need to test that one out a lot because in theory, it just doesn't seem super strong. Like it seems like, obviously if it hits the gas, it's amazing, but it could potentially fall apart really quick, although Chernabog is very good into a meta filled with steel. As a reminder, I'm using Ink Table for demonstration purposes, and the AI does not always make the best or wisest choices, so of course, take everything you see with a bit of a grain of salt. So here we actually do fall behind a little early, have to control the board a bit, and these are matches I wanted to test against a steel match, specifically because they have so much removal, and they have things like this Lilo that they can just keep putting out over and over again. The computer absolutely favors just recycling these Lilos to the extreme. There you saw the Honey Marin, great for the instant lore, really tiny body. It's unfortunate it goes down to a strength. Storm rages on, but hey, it's only 2 lore, so I guess what do you expect? Here's a match where I do get to show off the snake. I'm having to be a little more controlling. The nice thing is, once they're relying specifically on these Lilos, I can just go wide and challenge them out and then start questing, so I can slowly start getting back into this. The AI absolutely loves their zombie Lilos. And at this point, I'm just burning to go to the end. I throw the snake out. One snake for another. Yeah, one good snake deserves another. And now our opponent just can't do anything about it. They fell too far behind. They can summon Lilos to their heart's content, but I can just exert my characters for lore, or I can also try to find some more instant lore, which I do. Boom, snake, another 2, which is good. I'm a little worried about snake because of the vanish keyword. In a meta full of so much steel, it's possible it will be blown up right away, and it is a nice 4/4 buy to have, but if it got you your 2 lore, maybe you're okay with that, because that's really what it's in here for. Our opponent misses our 1-drop. It does put out a Smee. Here's an instance where I could protect it with the snake, which I do. I do actually quite like snake a bit on turn 2, specifically against steel decks. As we trade out, and here again, I have to be a little controlling. I can't just quite put on the gas against a deck like this, since it has so much early lore, but at least the DayZ gives us cards back in our hand. Robin Hood shift's always a little dangerous, and so here's an instance where if I was worried about this Robin Hood shift, there's just not a whole lot I can do about it because I have no offensive removal spells. But I think the more you add those in, the more the deck is going from straight aggro burn to kind of this mid-range section where you are potentially trying to control the board, whereas here I really just want to go fast, and I'm only challenging my opponent as much as I am because they have the faster build at the moment. The nice thing is, though, when you know you're not going against a Ruby deck, you just go wide. And a card like Pete is especially effective against Steel Song decks like this, where it says, okay, well, what do you want to do? With no crabs in here, a card like Pluto can be quite the pain. We're going to have to sacrifice 2 cards to it, or at least sacrifice 1 and then send another card to get rid of it. The nice thing is, as we can start doing goat bounce shenanigans, we're at least still keeping up with lore for our opponent. This giant cobra gets destroyed, but at least the goat and the snake can keep putting on pressure. And at this point, I just keep putting on instant lore pressure, and just from playing those cards, we're keeping up in the lore. And you'll see here's an instance where we've got the This Is My Family. We can sing it, which is essentially the same as questing. I would have gotten 1 from questing, and now can bounce the goat, and I have so much lore in hand as well, so as long as my opponent suddenly doesn't race ahead of me, goat for 1, that for 1, I could have just quested, sing boss, that's game. In your opening mulligan, you're always essentially just looking for your curve out. Any of the 1-drops into Smee on turn 2 is very strong. That puts on a lot of lore pressure. A lot of times, too, I will look for a Chromicon just to guarantee I have card draw, because on some occasions, you just won't see your card draw, and then you'll kind of struggle. So this is against a blue-gray item list, and this shows you how quick we can go, and what I'm hoping means this deck will be successful against these lists in the future, is that you are putting on so much lore pressure. Look, it's turn 4 and I'm already up to 9 lore. And yeah, they can take the Smee out, take out another Smee, but I can still just quest with this goat, sing bosses on a roll. And here's a great example. So I can set up however I want. So I'm probably going to stack the card draw, because once you get the Chromicons, unless they're running item hate, which most of these blue-gray decks tend to not be running item hate, I can just make sure like that, okay, This Is My Family, get into the Chromicon, which gets me into another draw, which gets me into the Diablo. Bosses on a roll just feel so much better when you have this additional draw to feed into it. And I can do the same thing here, put out a Chromicon. It doesn't matter how many cards my opponent has. Yes, this is a deck that can take advantage of this much ink, but I plan to just get way ahead of them at this point anyway. Yeah, I'm on 16 lore with 3 characters on the board and 2 Chromacons to just load up and dig. Okay, I just have to find my next lore burn. And as fast as these blue-gray decks can be, they're not going to be fast enough to keep up with this. Snake, bounce goat, play goat again, win. Card draw and Chromacon, I think, are really big keys here. You want to just be able to keep feeding into those cards. That's why I really like Diablo, especially if they get that turn 1 bell, which we haven't seen yet from the computer, but that's okay. Then it's a little safe to put out something like Chernabog. If your opponent has something that can sing Storm Rage on, do not put out your Chernabog turn 1 if you have the option of Diablo. If you have no other option, sometimes you just got to do it. They're going for the Oswald plan. It's not really worth it to challenge Oswald here because the Smee will then die. And again, I just want to put the lore pressure on my opponent. All right, there's the Bell, and the Bell can start challenging some of our cards. But again, the Smee doesn't really feel good here, so we'll get the Goat out. The Goat can at least start challenging some cards, which is nice. Bell gets to take out the Diablo free. But look how much card draw. Not only do we have the Chromacon, we've got 2 This Is My Family. So Chromacon is very good with this Snake now, because we can play him out. This is my family. Let's dig a little deeper. Ink one of the snakes, put out a broom. And the reason I put out a broom, even though it's so exposed to the bell, is that if they are challenging it or singing, they're not putting on their own lore pressure. And you see here, they're starting to get away from us. And this is a time where it's like, ooh, maybe we need to answer some of what they're doing, and we can only answer through challenging. We do not have the cards that'll do it. So I'm going to try to use the Fox, bounce the Goat while also banishing that, take out the Oswald. Hopefully this will slow them down a little bit. Hiram means they're going to have more cards than they know what to do with. There's a strength, and they have the control tools to keep us off the board. So the Bell is definitely an issue, and if you see the early Bell, I think you just got to hope you can be faster. On occasions, the Bell will, for lack of a better word, brick, where they'll just burn up their items early or they don't see their card draw. The problem is with a deck like this, I'm feeding them the card draw with the Chromacon. And once the board gets this big, it's just out of control. You can't catch up to it. Your only hope of victory is to get instant lore in 1 turn, but I can't get 5 in 1 turn. So I left this match in here as a way to show you that if you fall behind with this deck, again, it's very one-dimensional. You're going to struggle, so you have to absolutely keep ahead and keep that pressure on. As the most we can get here is with the Goat, go up to 18, and that's going to be all she wrote. Taking on blue-gray again. Normally, I don't like to keep docking my opening hand. Sometimes I get paranoid about that because I'll always draw into more uninkables. We actually get all 4 Diablos. I think I have the thought here, too, is like, maybe I just play every Diablo I have this turn. Which, yeah, I think I'm going to do. All right, let's just play all the birds. Yeah, this Tipo can just start picking them off, or they can blow a Storm Rage on one of them, but at least he's replacing himself. Yeah, those poor birds didn't last long. I can go in on the final Diablo. The Rose is probably a better option. The Rose is at least a big enough body that it's going to take Strength of a Raging Fire and a big board to get rid of it, which of course the Bell has, so... this Bell's such an annoying card. I don't know what they were thinking when they printed this card. So we're just going to try to keep drawing, see what we can get out there. Honey Marin gets an instant lore. We are still at least ahead on lore, although now they're going to start to catch up. But they have nothing in hand right now. So here's an instance where I don't necessarily want to Chromacon because I'm just going to start feeding their hand. Until they find their own source of card draw, I'm actually going to take this time to start controlling the board myself. So even in a deck like this, which is very one-dimensional, I am shifting my strategy based on the game board, that I have a ton of cards right now. They don't. I do not want to purposely get them back into this game with the Chromacon. I say this anytime there's a deck running the Chromacon. It sounds like a public service announcement, but it's true. Chromacon responsibly. You do not just gas it every single time you use it. When an opponent's struggling like this, no, let them struggle. Don't give them that chance to get back into the game. If they find their Flaversham and then they start going, okay, now you can hit the gas. And at this point, now I feel safely ahead. I'm on 13 lore. Little risky because the Tamatoa comes down, but now I feel confident enough. Okay, I think I can just burn them out before anything else happens here. Have a Snake Sing bosses on a roll, and you can see I can manipulate. Oh, 3 sources of instant lore. Yeah, don't mind if I do. Let me get those into my hand immediately. I can have the Pete sing it as well. More instant, and I just stack all my instant lore on the top and essentially set myself up for a victory next turn. Draw, already at 19. What are you going to do? And I know I have tons of sources of instant lore. You can clear this whole board, and it doesn't matter. This is where the deck is powerful, and this is where it shines. Free Lucky Dime, that's strong, but so is my instant lore gain. So that's the deck. It's really fun. I really appreciate the simplicity of it. I'm always a fan of simple decks that say, hey, I just want to do one thing and I want to do it now and I want to go fast and I want to be done with it. Sounds good. Again, I think you could make a few adjustments. If you want to get the absolute maximum amount of instant lore, you could put in a 4th Honeymaron. You could put in a 4th Chromacon. I think that could absolutely be worth it because this card is kind of what helps the deck go. But overall, I do like the numbers, and technically we are 1/60. But this is how Jimmy made it, and I'm not going to change what he made, especially if I can't find meaningful improvements. Like I said, there are a few times I felt like Snake or Fox kind of junked your hand, but I also think they were useful enough, and you saw in those videos, to make them worth keeping in here. So if you have any suggestions, I'm always open to hearing them. If you're struggling against a lot of these control decks, give this a shot. I'm not saying this is the premier aggro deck, but I really think this could at least give you a good chance, just because, as you saw, if you can get ahead, like any aggro deck wants to do, right, that you can just burn them out and they're not going to be able to stop you or get enough lore in time. Yes, a card like Bell is always going to be a problem because that's what it was designed for. It was designed to stop aggro early, which is a terrible design decision to give a control deck, but here we are. It's a state of play. So the link to the deck will be in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give a like and subscribe to the channel. We're closing in on 2,000 subs, and your help can get us there. Check out the description of the video for links to our Metafy page, where we offer private coaching, and consider becoming a Patreon or YouTube member for exclusive bonuses. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care.